Right now, somewhere in your mouth, there's probably a filling, maybe a crown, maybe a gap where a tooth used to be before a dentist pulled it out. Almost everyone reading this has had a cavity at some point in their life. In the US alone, over 90% of adults have had at least one. We spend more money on toothpaste, mouthwash, floss, whitening strips, and dental visits than almost any generation in human history has spent on anything related to their teeth. And yet, if you found a skull from 20,000 years ago and put it next to an X-ray of your own mouth, the ancient one would probably win. Not close to winning, just straight up have better teeth than you, with zero brushing, zero flossing, zero dentists, and zero fluoride. No skull decay filled in, no crowns, often no cavities at all. That should not make sense. So today we're going to figure out why it does. Let's start with what good teeth even looked like a few 100,000 years ago, because the picture is almost the opposite of what you'd expect. In the 1980s, an anthropologist named Clark Spencer Larson began systematically comparing the teeth of hunter-gatherer populations against the teeth of early farming populations from the same regions. Over and over, in totally unrelated parts of the world, the same pattern showed up. Hunter-gatherers had strong, straight, largely cavity-free teeth. Early farmers, living just a few thousand years later in the exact same valleys, had teeth riddled with decay. Something had changed, and it wasn't genetics. It was food.
Here's the thing about a hunter-gatherer diet. It was mechanically brutal on teeth and chemically kind to them at the same time. Wild meat, root vegetables, nuts, fibrous plants, tough dried foods, none of it was soft. None of it was sweet in the way we think of sweet today. Chewing wasn't a quick, easy motion. It was hard, repetitive work, sometimes hundreds of chewing cycles per meal. And that constant grinding did two things modern diets don't do. First, it wore teeth down evenly across the whole arch, which sounds bad, but actually prevented the kind of overcrowding and misalignment we associate with needing braces. Second, that same abrasive chewing scraped food particles and bacteria off the teeth as a side effect of just eating. You weren't brushing your teeth. Your dinner was brushing your teeth for you. There's direct evidence for this, and it's not guesswork. Archaeologists analyzed something called dental calculus, which is basically fossilized plaque, mineral buildup that hardens onto teeth over a lifetime and traps microscopic evidence of exactly what a person ate. In 2014, a team led by Christina Warrener used this method on skeletons spanning tens of thousands of years and found something remarkable. The bacterial makeup of ancient mouths was dramatically different from ours. Pre-agricultural populations had diverse, relatively low cavity-causing bacterial communities. The moment populations shifted to farming, the balance of bacteria in their mouths shifted toward the cavity-causing kind, and it never really recovered. We are, dental bacteria-wise, still living in the aftermath of a shift that started 10,000 years ago. So what actually changed when humans started farming? Grain. Big-time grain. Wheat, barley, rice, corn, all starchy, all soft compared to wild root vegetables and tough meat, and all of it breaks down into sugar the moment your saliva touches it. Every early farming society we have dental records for shows the same spike in tooth decay within a few generations of adopting agriculture. Egypt, the Near East, coastal China, Mesoamerica, it didn't matter where in the world it happened, the pattern repeated. Soft, starchy farmed food met human teeth that had spent hundreds of thousands of years evolving for something completely different, and the teeth lost.
But it wasn't only about decay. It was about shape. This is where things get genuinely strange, because the size and shape of your jaw isn't fixed the way your eye color is. It's shaped in part by how hard you chew as a child while your bones are still developing. In the early 1930s, a dentist named Weston Price traveled to isolated communities around the world, from Swiss alpine villages to Pacific islands to indigenous communities in North America, specifically to study populations that were still eating traditional, unprocessed diets. What he documented over and over was wide, well-formed jaws with enough room for every tooth, including the wisdom teeth, to come in straight. Then he documented what happened in the same families after they started eating imported, processed Western food. Narrower jaws, crowded teeth, and impacted wisdom teeth in the very next generation. Same genes, different food, different mouths. That's the part that should really mess with you. Wisdom tooth impaction, the thing that sends millions of people into oral surgery every single year, is not really an ancient human problem. Skeletal evidence shows that ancient jaws were, on average, large enough to comfortably fit a full set of 32 teeth, wisdom teeth included.
Softer food during childhood means less mechanical stress on the developing jaw, and less mechanical stress means a smaller jaw grows in. Your teeth, though, didn't get the memo. They still grow in at roughly the same size they always have, so you end up with a jaw built for a softer, modern diet, trying to fit teeth built for a world of raw roots and tough dried meat. And the wisdom teeth are the ones that pay the price, quite literally, sometimes to the tune of a few $1,000s at the oral surgeon.
Now, none of this means ancient life was some kind of dental paradise. Ancient humans dealt with plenty of oral problems modern dentistry has mostly solved. Teeth ground down to painful stubs from grit and stone-milled flour, abscesses with no antibiotics to fight them, broken teeth from using them as tools, and there's a lot of evidence for that. Skeletons regularly show grooves worn into the front teeth from repeatedly pulling sinew or plant fiber through the mouth to soften it, essentially using teeth as a third hand. That's not a sign of neglect. It's a sign that teeth were treated as working tools, not just something to chew with. And here's something that might surprise you. Ancient humans absolutely practiced dental hygiene. It just looked different. Researchers examining Neanderthal teeth, some dating back over 100,000 years, have found tiny parallel grooves on the sides of teeth, consistent with someone deliberately dragging a thin object, most likely a brass stem or a small stick, between their teeth over and over. That's a toothpick. Neanderthals were flossing, in a very rough sense, over 100,000 years before the first bristled toothbrush existed. Skeletons from far more recent history, going back a few thousand years, show similar wear patterns, along with evidence that people chewed on fibrous twigs to fray the end into a crude brush and scrub their teeth with it. The tools were primitive. The instinct to keep your mouth clean clearly wasn't.
So here's the actual picture, start to finish. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans ate a diet that was mechanically tough and chemically low in sugar. And that combination built wide, strong jaws and mouths that were naturally resistant to decay, even with zero dental care as we define it today. Then, around 10,000 years ago, farming introduced soft, starchy food, and cavity rates climbed for the first time in the archaeological record. Then jaws started shrinking generation by generation as diets kept softening, eventually turning wisdom teeth from a normal part of a full smile into a surgical inconvenience. And then, a couple hundred years ago, refined sugar showed up in massive quantities, and the whole system that had worked reasonably well for a very long time basically broke down, forcing us to invent toothbrushes, fluoride, and modern dentistry just to manage a problem our own diet was creating. Which brings us back to that skull from 20,000 years ago. It never saw a dentist, it never used toothpaste, and there's a real chance its owner still had a straighter, more cavity-free set of teeth than most people walking around today. Not because ancient humans were healthier in some mystical general sense. Plenty about their lives was brutal in ways modern medicine has genuinely fixed. But when it comes specifically to teeth, the tough, low-sugar diet that shaped human jaws for hundreds of thousands of years turned out to be almost exactly what a dentist would recommend if you asked one today, minus the wild honey. We didn't get worse teeth because our biology changed. We got worse teeth because we invented food our biology was never built to handle, and we've been trying to brush our way out of that decision ever since.